The reason we have a war in Ukraine is because of the United States. The United States fomented and succeeded in a coup to overthrow the Ukrainian government, the so-called Color Revolution in 2014. And it's about time everybody knew that. Surprised that President Putin was that candid on the international stage?
No, because, prior to that, Russia announced its new foreign policy, which is predicated on its stepping away from the West and self-declaring themselves to be a major center of world influence. And in doing so, Russia no longer plays nice with the West. Russia has for some time tried to be a partner with the West, to work with the West, to integrate with the West. But the West has not only rejected Russia, but has declared war against Russia. And so I knew when he made the announcement of this new Russian foreign policy definition that it would have an impact on how Russia postures globally. And this is it. Russia's done playing nice with the West. No more, diplomatic speeches, no more, trying to work things out behind the scenes. They're going to call it as they see it. And who can take umbrage with what Putin said? This is a war created by the United States. He's 100% correct.
The assassination of Tartarsky by blowing him up from a bomb that was inside a statue of himself that a young woman gave him. She then sits down in the first or second row. The bomb explodes. She's probably going to say, somebody just handed it to me. Didn't know there was a bomb in there. Otherwise, why would I be seated here? Whatever. Tartarsky was, to, as I understand it, President Putin's right on the political spectrum, a nationalist that wanted an even heavier hand than the President Putin is using in Ukraine. Similar to the father of Daria Dugina, the father was the target. Daria ended up being killed. Is this the style of Ukraine intel? And if it is, what conceivable purpose does it serve? It's a pinprick as far as Putin is concerned, I would think.
Well, it's definitely the work of the SBU, the Ukrainian intelligence services. The Russian FSB is very good at what they do. And they forensically deconstructed the Daria Dugina assassination plot, and they have made amazing progress in terms of, deconstructing what happened with, Mr. Fomin, Maxim Fomin. He's his nom de guerre. What good? It's a vehicle of intimidation. It's the same thing. Why does the Center for Countering Disinformation, the agency working for the president of Ukraine, publish a blacklist that puts out the names of Americans? I'm number one on the list, by the way, accusing us of being terrorists, of being war criminals, etc. I'm also on the Mir Tavares list, the same list that Daria Dugina and Maxim Fomin were on. Now, I'm marked for death. I think what they're trying to do is intimidate people, scare them. America slaughtered Ukraine. We've slaughtered 400,000. Ukraine's destroyed. And the smart thinking Taiwanese are saying that is not going to be our future. So this is just American politicians being straight up stupid. Now, I'm hoping the American people can see through this nonsense. I know the Taiwanese people are seeing through it, and the Chinese Communist Party that Mr. McCall belittles, they don't care about him, because at the end of the day, he's a nobody. He controls a Pentagon budget. That's it. Doesn't control anything else. And Chinese aren't intimidated by the Pentagon budget, by him, or any words that come out of his mouth or Mr. McCarthy's mouth.
Last night, the White House revealed that the president authorized another $2.8 billion with a B in military equipment to make its way to Ukraine. It appears to be most of that is HIMARS. More of the same. Where's it getting us? What's it going to accomplish?
Well, it's going to further strip away, I think 500 million of that, it comes directly from our stockpiles. So again, for the average American listener, let me tell you what's happening. They're taking weapons that your taxpayer dollars went to procure and stockpile, so that if we ever had to go to war, we had weapons to do. We're taking these weapons from our stockpile. We're taking them away from American troops at a time, by the way, when McCarthy and McCall, those great Americans, are talking about the potential for conflict with China. So rather than stockpiling the weapons, we're giving them away to Ukraine, who is defeated. Their army is crushed. These weapons didn't make a difference previously. They're not going to make a difference now. They're just going to result in more dead Ukrainians and a weaker America. Thank you, Joe Biden.
What is this Ukraine, since you brought us there? What is the significance of the now near universally accepted fall of Bakhmut. Our friend and colleague, Colonel McGregor, argues that the Russians brilliantly induced or seduced more Ukraine troops into the defense of Bakhmut than it was really worth. And President Zelensky and his military commanders foolishly sent more human beings there that now came back in body bags than was worth in a losing effort.
Well, first of all, I'll take umbrage that the Ukrainians were foolish here. The Bakhmut Soledar complex, because Soledar was a sister city to the north of Bakhmut. Each of them have deep underground salt mines that enhance the defensibility of this. They've been dug in forever. I could have made a case that the Ukrainians were seeking to break the back of the Russian army by defending the most defensible space in Ukraine, by digging in and forcing the Russians to come at them in urban combat, some of the most difficult combat, that the Ukrainians were saying, we can break their back, therefore we can break the will of their army, the will of their people, we can bring this fighting to a close. We can drive Russia to the negotiating table. So I understand completely what the Ukrainians were trying to do. The problem is they were up against the Russian army, and not just the Russian army, Wagner. And Wagner is a unique force with a unique set of combat skills and a unique ethos about fighting. And Wagner just ground these guys up. I mean, they slaughtered them. And at some point in time, if you're the Ukrainians, you have to say, do we continue to double down on stupid? Meaning what we're doing isn't working. We're losing. We don't have a solution. If we're just replaying the same death and destruction over again, maybe we should fall back on. But they politically committed. And what's happened is, Colonel McGregor's right, the Russians have broken the back of the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army will never recover from Bakhmut. The number of dead is mind-boggling to the Western mind, and the resources that were poured into that. Ukraine put everything they have into that fight, and Wagner beat them.
Jack Devine, who of course takes a different position on the progress of Russian forces westward, the he, H-E, to whom Devine refers several times in the second half of this clip, is obviously President Putin. This will get under your skin, Scott.
In the last 2 months, you were telling me these great wizards of the war were saying the Russians have the 300,000 man army and they're going to roll right over Ukraine. Here we are, 150,000 troops went in, and they may or may not have taken a town. I mean, he is having a hard time. This is not victory. Anybody that thinks he's won something, God bless you. But I mean, I don't know how I could hold my head and invade a country and move a few kilometers, So I think he's in trouble. I think he's in serious trouble. That's why there's a fight between the regular military and the Wagner group.
That's a lot to unpack, Scott, but go ahead.
I mean, Mr. Devine obviously has bought into a certain narrative. It's a narrative that's void of very foundation. It's an ideological narrative. He's misrepresented this fight. Hey, Jack, when you're in a attritional warfare thing, attrition, it's a word, look it up. I know the CIA has dictionaries. Look it up. It's not about taking land. It's about grinding the enemy down. So if you're in an attritional battle and you kill 80,000 of them and you lose 30,000 guys, you've won a major victory, Jack. And so that's what they've been doing. They've won it. For a CIA guy, he doesn't know much about Vladimir Putin. He doesn't know much about Russia. He doesn't know much about the Russian strategy. I think, again, I respect him. I respect what he did for his country. And I'm not here. I apologize if anything I just said came off as denigrating Mr. Devine. But he's wrong. He's dead wrong. But the proof is in the pudding. I mean, the beauty of things like this is I just wait. And the facts will come to me. They're moving away from him. They're moving away from all the people that were trumping up the Ukrainians, saying they were going to do X, Y, and Z, because they were under the perception that, when people like myself said Russia was going to win fast early on, that's because we thought Russia was going to invade. But when Russia came in with a special military operation, we've had this discussion before,
right?
The timeline, it's thrown out the window. So what Jack Devine and others don't understand is Russia's not working from a calendar. Russia's working from results. And the results 100% favor Russia. There's not a single military expert out there that will tell you that the momentum is with Russia. The trajectory is on Russia's side. And there's no chance right now for Ukraine to flip that script.
Matt Van Dyke is the young American that from time to time we interview from the field in Ukraine. He works with a group of veterans, he tells us, who are looking for unexploded mines and neutralizing them, and also from time to time helping to train rear end, if you will, Ukrainian units. But he spent a week or two at the front lines. He came back. We spoke with him this morning. And I asked him about Bakhmut and its failure and whether the battle was worth it. Take a listen.
Whether Bakhmut was worth it is something that historians will debate. We're not going to know that until we see the outcome of the rest of the war. It certainly has been high in casualties. It was given attention instead of a Ukrainian counteroffensive in the winter. But I think that Russia isn't pushing an offensive because Putin's game is to wait it out, similar to how Assad in Syria just waited until the world lost interest. I think that's Putin's playbook for this.
What do you think? He may have his finger on something, but Putin is a master of patience.
Putin is a master of winning. And sometimes winning requires patience, or it definitely requires you not to be lured into a trap or to do things precipitously, to do things before you're ready to do them. But I always laugh when people talk about Putin's playbook. Hey, Matt, publish it, man. You'd make $1 million, because no one has Putin's playbook except Putin. And it's again, he's misrepresented. To think that all Russia did is sit in Syria means you have total ignorance about what happened in Syria. Russia, together with the Syrian army, routed the various insurgent groups. Damascus used to be surrounded by ISIS and Al-Qaeda groups that controlled entire neighborhoods. Not anymore. The Dara region used to be under the control of the Muslim Brotherhood. Not anymore. They've all been cleaned up and pushed to the north. That's not called sitting down. That's called winning. And you know who did it? The Russians did it. So Matt just doesn't know what he's talking about. Putin's playbook is patience, but you don't sit there. Sitting implies you're doing nothing. The Russians are very active. All you have to take a look is ask the Ukrainians, how many men they're losing every day, how much equipment they're losing, what damage is being done. That's not being done because the Russians are just sitting there. It's being done because the Russians are actively kicking the Ukrainians. I'll just say that, Matt, I know you took umbrage at this before, but go home. You're going to die. Straight up die. A lot of your fellow Americans and foreigners are dying now. The combat's just going to get worse. Go home. Do yourself a favor, because you're not going to win this conflict.